Hello everyone, my name is Salar and you're welcome to Smart Code. This episode is different. We won't develop any application. I will talk about some very common mistakes made by newbie or the students. The mistakes which I have compiled are based on my teaching experience. When I teach my students, I highlight these mistakes so that they become better programmer. However, on the internet, when I visit different blogs or the forums, what I see there, a lot of newcomers in the field of web development making the same mistakes. So I thought, why not make a tutorial on that and help everyone out there? I hope you will like and appreciate this effort. I'll show you on screen examples so that you get the better picture. Before we go further and look at the mistakes one by one, I would like to inform you there is a subscribe button down below the video. Just hit the button and it would be so nice of you, right? So let's get it started now. The mistake number one, inline CSS. In 2022, I still see the examples where the CSS is directly coded inside the HTML elements. And honestly speaking, I don't get it. Some says they are following any tutorial or reading some material where the inline CSS is used. I would recommend stop learning CSS from that material because that might be the outdated one. Inline CSS must be avoided. You should write CSS in an external CSS file. There are many advantages for having a different CSS file. For example, it would be easy to carry out maintenance work on your HTML, improve code readability, and also improve the performance of your website because external CSS files are cached by the browser. They are not loaded every time you visit a page, right? And in spite of the fact that external CSS files have all the advantages, there are a couple of reasons where you are actually allowed to use inline CSS. For example, if you code a super simple website with standalone HTML document, then you might go for inline CSS. So on the screen, you see a paragraph where a CSS is applied directly inside the HTML. What I want you to do is that remove this inline style from here, create a CSS file, link that file to the HTML, and put your styles in that file, right? Let's now move on to the next mistake. The mistake is you don't use semantic elements. HTML5 came with several different semantic elements for defining the structure of the web page. For example, header, footer, nav, main, section, to name a few. And these elements are semantic. They have extra information to tell the browser, which is then used by the search engines. So when the semantic tags are available for defining the core structure of the page, there is no need to code a div as a replacement to the semantic element. Let's see the example on the screen, which is not a good practice according to me. I want the header and the footer section, and I coded them using the div. There won't be any issue with the layout of the header and the footer because the div is actually a block container. But at the same time, the div is a generic element. It never tells the browser the code inside me belongs either to the header section of the page or to the footer section. So how do the browser or any search engine will find out the title or the information about your web page? Because there is no documented header section. So it won't do any good if you replace the semantic elements with the divs. To improve this piece of code, you only make the use of semantic elements, such as for defining the header, we have the header element, and for the footer, we have the footer element, right? So now things are much better. A small fix with great impact. The browser is now aware there is a proper header section on the page that might be containing the site title, the menus, and the logo, right? The search engines will also be happy. We usually code the site title in the head section with the help of H1 element. So the search engines can easily find the header section because of the semantic header element and then can easily find the H1 element in that section to get to know the more about the content provided on the page. So that was mistake number 2. And what we have learned from the mistake is that we should prioritize the use of the HTML semantic elements. Let's now move on to the next mistake. The next mistake is about the use of unoptimized images. I have seen my students as well as some professionals trying to optimize the images via the CSS. This practice needs to be avoided. Images must be optimized before they are used in the code. A very common attempt to optimize the image via the CSS is massive size reduction. You download the image from any image library and code it in the HTML and then use CSS to adjust or reduce the size of the image. Using the CSS and perform massive size reduction simply means you are putting a lot of burden to the browser. Your browser does an extra job. It cuts down the size of the image before displaying it. As a result, your website loads slowly and you face the performance issue. Let's have a look on the example. I have an image named Winter. I downloaded this image and coded it to the HTML without making any changes to it. So let me show you the image. Now here you see the size of the image is 4.2 megabytes and the dimensions are 7054 pixels into 4708 pixels. In the browser you will see a very small portion of the image, and in order to see the whole image you need to scroll up and down or left to right. So now I go in my HTML file and reduce the size of the image using the CSS. This size reduction is the massive one. Let's now see how the browser will react on it. We need to refresh the page, and here you see. Did you notice? The loading speed was terribly slow. Now just imagine what would be the loading speed if there are tens of images. So you see the problem with the massive resizing in the browser. You will always optimize the images before you code them on the web. And image optimization doesn't only mean to reduce the size of the images in advance. There are some other aspects which you also need to consider. For example, to choose the right image format, such as PNG, JPEG, GIF, WebP, etc. These formats have their own properties. The weight of the images can also be in megabytes, and in this case, you need to find a best way to compress them, right? In the description of this video, I will put some very good article on image optimization. You can read them to know the more about the optimization process later on. So that was the mistake number 3, and I hope you won't repeat this mistake again. Let's now move on to the mistake number 4, using ID to style the elements. I see very often the use of IDs in the CSS. Let me tell you plainly and clearly. IDs are not for CSS. IDs are unique and they are for JavaScript. You can accomplish any style just by using the classes. And sometimes you need to use the classes wisely to accomplish the advanced and complicated design. If you continue using the IDs in your style sheet, you are risking yourself. You enter into the war of specificity, and you need to code more IDs in order to override some styles because the IDs have very high specificity value. If you are unfamiliar with the term specificity, then I would recommend my tutorial on that. I covered the specificity in detail and you can find the tutorial on my channel. Specificity is a core concept and you can't style in CSS without having an idea how specificity works, right? So you will use classes to style the elements, not the IDs. This is the right way to code the CSS. Making mistakes is quite normal, but keep making the same mistakes is not normal. We need to learn from our mistakes and rectify them. And this is the purpose of this tutorial. I just want to highlight the mistakes which beginners do. I talked about 4 different mistakes, but there are several mistakes on my list which I will be talking about in the second part. So don't forget to check the second part. I will see you there and thanks for watching.